Most agents will tell you to run from any home that's ever flooded. That advice, quite frankly, is lazy, and it's costing buyers good homes in great neighborhoods for the wrong reason. I want to show you what actually happened here in 2017 and why one historic storm doesn't mean a home is a bad buy. All right. So that being said, we're talking about Hurricane Harvey, and what most buyers in our area will start out in a search. They are going to insist that they get a property that's never been flooded. The reality is that standard eliminates a huge chunk of houses that would be great homes, and it's really just an unfortunate incident that happened in 2017 in a 1,000-year storm that will probably never happen again, in our lifetime at least. We're going to talk about which areas are actually affected by that in our area and which ones chronically flood, why, and why you shouldn't base your search completely off the fact that the house has flooded or not flooded ever. Okay. A lot of times areas that we're looking in are in areas that have flooded, but it's new construction that's happened since 2017. So they, just happen to luck out based off the fact that they weren't in existence at the time of 2017 that came around. So we're gonna talk a little bit about the facts around Hurricane Harvey in 2017 and what it actually was. Harvey dropped about 50 inches of rain in most areas over the course of 48 hours. Okay. Most areas anywhere in the world are going to have flooding issues with that much rainfall. What caused that is there was a high pressure system that was sitting over top of Austin, and the hurricane came in and then worked its way up and down the coastline, recharging. So typically a hurricane comes into land, makes landfall, and it quickly fizzles out because it no longer has the power of the Gulf to continue to feed it, right? So most areas, like I said, would have issues with that. It's basically essentially a perfect storm, like the movie. It is basically the worst storm that you could possibly have at the worst time. And here's some of the data. So nearly 6,963 homes and 123 businesses were affected or damaged across Galveston County. This is not a routine storm. It was one of the most extreme rainfall events in U.S. history for any specific area. So you're talking seriously like a 1,000-year flood. They talk about 500-year flood. This is a 1,000-year event, right? One of the reasons that buyers start with a never flooded and then soften is because what they do is they start their search and they want, I don't want a house that's flooded ever. Okay. Then you start getting out there and you start looking. And I will say this, there are a lot of homes in specific areas that what essentially happens is the homes were bought by investors after the flood, right? They then fixed them up, remodeled them, and then sold them. And so since then, some of these folks have then now moved in, lived there for a little while, and have moved out. And so typically in these sellers' disclosures, they're asking, has the house ever flooded? And to their knowledge, it hasn't, because during the time that they lived in the house, it didn't flood. Now, could they necessarily have looked up the history and all that stuff and dug a little deeper? Yes. And also that's kind of the job of the buyer's agent to kind of look into that kind of stuff. There's ways that you can contact insurance agents and stuff that they can run reports and see if there were any claims on that particular property. That's one of the best ways to go ahead and do that for true research. I think a lot of agents don't know that you can do that. And sometimes that's an issue. I've also had times where we get into the final walkthrough and there's been no mention of flood in this neighborhood whatsoever. And then all of a sudden you hear from the seller, oh yeah, all the houses around us flooded except for these two right here. And you're like, well, that would have been nice to know previously, right? So that's super important that you find an agent that's hyper local, knows exactly what areas have flooded and what haven't. And when you're talking about Bay Area, Houston, there's some very specific areas that are more susceptible to what I would consider chronic flooding, where it happens more often during these rain events. There's a couple of things that you guys need to know. Number one, about hurricanes. If you're from anywhere that doesn't normally get them, hurricanes are different almost every single time. So the main things are, you can break them up into like 3 categories. Number one are wind events. If typically like category 4 and above, you would consider those pretty significant wind events. You're going to have roofs tear off. You're going to have fences knocked down. You're going to have issues basically have to do with wind. Probably, in my opinion, probably some of the most dangerous, right? Because you've got flying debris and stuff like that. You're counting on people to have things, nailed down. And typically if people evacuate, they don't worry about that as much as they do about getting out of Dodge. Second one that you can have is what I call storm surge event, or what is called a storm surge event. So I didn't make that up. Storm surges basically are the water penetrates deeper inland based off of, I guess, pressure of the storm. But basically, what that does is that pushes water into areas that normally don't get water. And it's due to the storm pushing that water. Hurricane Ike in Galveston, that was a big deal. Broke and went over the seawall. And that's when kind of what you would consider all hell broke loose. Hurricane Ike, I'd also consider, especially when it got to the north side of Houston, a wind event. So there are lots of little tornadoes that spun off of that and caused all kinds of electricity issues. And at that time, I was out of power for about 14 days. All right, and then there's the third type, which is a rain event. And Hurricane Harvey was a very significant rain event. Like I said, you're talking in our areas, somewhere between 50 and 58 inches fell within 48 hours. And depending on where you're at, where the water shed, because keep in mind, this is all coastal plains. So water, all these bayous and stuff, all of it has to get back into the Gulf. So when the rain falls on the land, it still has to work its way down. And in some cases, it wasn't the initial flooding that happened. It was the watershed as it made its way back down to the Gulf Coast that caused the creeks to really overflow. Number one, Friendswood has a lot of issues with what's Clear Creek. And anywhere that's north of 518 or Main Street that runs through League City, depending on where you're at, is where we call it. A lot of that area flooded. And then parts of Friendswood near Forest Bend flood. Lots of flood areas, mostly because it's very close to the creek. Also, another area, Nassau Bay, had quite a bit of flooding. It's because it's low-lying land near water. Okay. And then Dickinson also had a lot due to Dickinson Bayou. So if you're near a creek, near a bayou, certain parts, certain neighborhoods, and it's not built up, there's a good chance that you're going to get chronic flooding with pretty much every major named storm. And even just a significant rain event could potentially cause flooding. So those are the areas that are going to see chronic risk. The good news is that things have been done about it. You know, Harvey was a big enough storm that city, municipalities and stuff like that are trying to mitigate that stuff. So some of the things that are going on is League City recently just completed phase 1 of a major flood mitigation study in 2022, identifying projects that could lower water levels by up to 4 feet during the Harvey level event. Phase 2 was approved by the Army Corps of Engineers in 2025, with completion expected in 2028. The city is also running immediate drainage projects now, including work in interurban and along Hughes Lane and Dietz Road, breaking ground in 2026. Okay. That was some significant flooding, and that's kind of like on the south border with Dickinson. This is a market actively investing in fixing its flood problem, which matters when evaluating long-term risk. So if we were to have a Harvey-like event again, good chances is that some of the things that have been done would mitigate more flooding. A generic agent wouldn't know that. Say you pick up an agent from Cypress, Katy, Rosenberg, the Woodlands, Conroe, and then you come down here with them, there's a good chance that they're not going to know which areas are flooded. And floodplain maps and all that stuff, while useful, are usually considered out of date because it takes the government a long time to adjust those. Now they're essentially adjusting everything to become a floodplain. And the important thing that you want to look for when buying a house is, and especially with insurance, and if it's an area that is expected to flood, you're going to want to get an elevation certificate where they get the base flood elevation or BFE. And as long as the house is above that, you're going to have a cheaper flood insurance. If it's below, then it's going to depend on what the risk level is. Obviously, that's what insurance is for, right? For flood risk or risk in general. Some of the other things, even local agents, if they don't have a lot of experience or aren't from the area, are not going to really know which parts of town flooded. So it's just super important that when you choose your agent and flooding is a big deal to you, you're going to want to make sure that you have an agent that's kind of been around for a while, aware of the risks, the areas that are prone to chronic flooding, stuff like that. And this is a thing that a lot of agents don't want to talk about. They're worried about liability and this sort of stuff. But here's the reason that we need to talk about it is you don't want to have that surprise later on down the road after you purchase a house and you find out that you're in an area that floods all the time. And then how to actually evaluate a flooded home. So when you do look at a house, okay, you're looking at August 2017 is when Harvey happened. You find out when that flood happened. If it flooded in August 2017, there's a good chance that it was a one-time event. And then what you need to do is then ask the street or neighborhood that is near either Clear Creek, Dickinson Bayou, or low-lying water areas such as Nassau Bay. Seabrook also has a lot of those, Lago. You just have to be aware of where those are at and which ones have a history of chronic flooding. And then look at what work has been done to mitigate that flood. Dickinson's been doing a lot of work. They found out that there are a lot of issues that had been in the past overlooked and ignored and pushed on. And instead of being proactive, ended up having to be reactive. And then you want to make sure that you talk to an agent that actually knows and has experience working in this area so that you know where your level of risk is going to be. And then the main thing is that, one flood history or one flood is not the full picture. You need to kind of know the whole thing. It's important, not one event, but chronic flooding. And then also you want to make sure that you're aware of what's causing the flooding so that when a storm does come and it's giving you the signs that it may be a water event, a storm surge event, or a wind event, that you know how to handle that situation or at least be aware of what to expect. So if you're curious about that, if you're looking to move to the Bay Area, Houston, I'm happy to explain those things to you. I'm happy to spend some time with you on that. I run into this all the time. We have people from out of state. We have people from other parts of town that move down here. One of the first things that they talk about is they don't want to live in an area that's flooded. That's great. And I appreciate that. I have 100% zero problem with looking for a house that has never flooded before. I also want to warn you that you want to make sure that it's in a chronic flood area and not just a one-time storm. All right. So that's it about flood. If you have any more questions, reach out to me and I'm looking forward to answering all those questions for you. And again, remember, roar your way home.